Hello, everybody. Welcome in today. We are going to do a debate review. As you guys know, me and Parker had our vegan debate last night on TikTok. And we just want to go over some of the topics, some of the propositions that were made in the debate, as well as some of Parker's remarks. And we have here two great vegan activists on TikTok, Plants and Plates and Kalel. These guys are great. I will follow them as well. But yeah, let's get into it. So as far as I can say, I think that the debate went fairly well on my end. I think that I did a good job in defending veganism, attacking his claims and that he made against it. I think that we should have gotten to more like of the empirics behind veganism, all the net utility about it. But Parker kind of just didn't want to talk about it. He kind of just skimmed it over, and we'll get into that eventually. But yeah, what do you guys think so far? What were you guys just comment or general remarks on it?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's great. I think he intentionally didn't want to get into a lot of the utility of veganism because I think it would have proved a lot of his positions to be completely absurd. So I think he wanted to try to just keep it on NTT and keep going in circles as much as possible, and then bring other things into the debate that were irrelevant. But yeah, overall, I think it was good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you did a great job with the NTT, and I think that you did a great job spotlighting the absurdities in the anti-vegan arguments. It's a great shame that there's so many complex empirics on veganism and so many so many converging arguments as well. And it's such a great shame that it didn't explore multiple different avenues that it could have gone down. And ultimately, I think that the climatic point in the debate was this sort of like perpetual merry-go-round. Not by you. I thought you did a great job. I just think Parker wouldn't at a certain point engage in your arguments, and it wasted a significant amount of time.
Yeah, he was not willing to be pressed on this issue. And the thing this entire time, he kept saying, I don't know, right? If you guys watched the debate, he kept saying, I don't know. When I really pressed him on the issues, he kept saying, I don't know. I'm agnostic on that, which in other contexts it would be okay. But the problem is we actually set this debate up like days prior. Like we had time to hold our positions. Yet, coming into a debate saying, I don't know is not really a good argument. It's not really a good stance to hold when you're defending your own position. And that's why he didn't want to get pressed on. But yeah, any specific parts that you guys want to talk about?
I'm just going to touch on that. I don't know a little bit really quickly.
Okay.
It's kind of sort of like forming a debate and saying like, is torturing and abusing a dog wrong? And then, somebody holding the side that, yeah, that's the right thing to do. But then when they're pressed on it, they say, I don't know. So it's just an absurdity in itself to even get to that conclusion.
Yeah, I was trying to hone in on the absurdity in his position, and I think that's what Aimdir came in and kind of elaborated more on that. And then again, it came down to aesthetic value, right? If you go back to that part, he kept saying aesthetic value. That was the reason why that justified harming those animals. Because he talked about rationality, but that canceled out, right? Because even no matter how rational a person was, he would still not harm them. So it came down to really wasn't rationality, it was species. And then he said, okay, I was trying to get the cutoff between a human and a non-human. And then he said aesthetic value. So we can run this reductio, right? Like, okay, what exactly is the cutoff where a person would be non-human such that you get to put him in a gas chamber, right? And he just did not want to say it. And look, it's okay to be agnostic there, but that position saying I don't know entails that to you it might be possible that there's a specific feature of your body, like a nose or ear or hair color, that this certain aesthetic value that might warrant you the right to put someone in a gas chamber like that. I think that's ridiculous. And the chat knew this. Like the chat was on my side in this regards. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's sort of like you have like let's say you have 1,000 people in front of a gas chamber, and each person down the line you slowly start adding or removing a trait from them. So let's say the first person is a human, and then the next person or looks human, and then the next person has an extra eye, and then the next person has an extra arm, and then the next person's a little green. Eventually, there's going to be a point to where he says, "Here's the divide. We can put the rest of these people into a gas chamber, but these people we can't." So it's just an absurd position to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, I would have gone back multiple steps in the process. And for me, I think in society, even if the vast majority of people want to be consumers of meat, at least like the vast majority of people would at least identify themselves as being welfareists, right? Even if they want to consume meat. So the initial question was, what's your views on putting pigs in gas chambers? And he said, I'm agnostic. And to me, that's insane to me, because I think at least the vast majority of people would agree that putting pigs in gas chambers in and of itself is reminiscent of the most abhorrent act that's ever been committed by one human against another. So for me, like moving from that step, I would have been like appalled at that stage. But then moving to the next step, which would have essentially been naturally dogs, just saying, what's your thoughts on putting dogs in gas chambers, and saying I'm agnostic on that. To me, that's a reductio for me in and of itself, way before you even move on to NTT in relation to humans. I just think that's insane.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's why I think Parker was being so dishonest here in that regards, because like I think he knows what I was trying to get to, but he was dishonestly saying I'm agnostic because he didn't want to bite the bullet, Um,
Sadly, yeah, it's a lot of there's a lot of dishonesty, and when you debate people like that, obviously we all know that when you engage in discourse about veganism, you end up in one of two avenues: a logical contradiction, or one that adopts a completely absurd position. And I think that people that are inherently dishonest in this line of reasoning are always willing to adopt these incredibly absurd positions that I think the vast majority of people in society would think would be absolutely morally abhorrent.
right. And then he tried to argue that we should put animals in jail or something, right? I think time it's not going to be morally easy or accessible.
So why don't we put lions in prison? Because like killing them would be more net negative, right?
I never said we put lions in prison.
No, we should though, because that would be more humane to treat them by putting them in prison rather than like killing them, because killing them would be a moral wrong because they're sentient.
Stop. This is so ridiculous.
I know, why not? Why not? You put humans in prison. Why don't you put animals in prison?
Stop, bro. Stop. This is so disingenuous.
Wait, how is this disingenuous? You just ran NTT. I asked the same thing back.
Stop. Let me speak, bro. Okay. I'm not saying to treat lions like people. What I'm saying is all living beings, all animals have the right to live. We should not go harm them if we don't have to. Now, of course, under my threshold deontics, I would say that there is a threshold in which the consequences of not doing anything are going to be severe enough to warrant, perhaps bending the rules a bit. But the point is that you are speciesist because you think that some animals don't deserve rights. Okay? And that's what's tied a lot to sexism, dehumanization, right? To women, misogyny. Okay. So, yeah, the speciesism thing, right? He was trying to say that because we don't value lions the same way we value humans, therefore I'm speciesist too, right? Kind of this appeal to hypocrisy. And I explained to him, right? You guys just heard, no, it's not that we have to treat lions like me or like you. It's that they have equal rights. Humans have rights just as animals should have rights. But because lions have less rationality, they have less, perhaps sentience, other things like that, that we would treat them differently within our society. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's just an appeal to futility. I think he's basically saying because lions do something somewhere, then I can put pigs in a gas chamber. So I just think it's absurd to even bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, if you look at it from a bioethical vantage point, animals are moral patients. They're not moral agents, of course. So we don't take our behavioral cues from lions as much as we do from children. So I think that the logical consistency there is by viewing animals as what they are, moral patients and not moral agents, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Any other parts that you guys wanted to talk about?
We should touch on, I think, like the utilitarian aspect in the beginning that he
Can
brought up.
I say one thing that's a bit referential to that last clip?
Mhm.
Obviously, like you had those great papers that were written about the way that meat consumption perpetuates psychological notions of misogyny and homophobia and sexism and racism. And I think it's such a great shame that this would have been so resonant for Parker's, his tirade on social media. Obviously, he purports to be so anti any of these things, and it was almost like he was desperate for you not to articulate the empirics on those things, because then, of course, he wouldn't have to engage in discourse about them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so many great empirics on this showing that, like, when we close the gap between, like, when people are aware of who the animals are, and we stop viewing them, or stop perceiving them as just objects and just like someone, just like a human would be, when we start closing that gap between humans and animals, people begin to develop better perceptions of our own species, right? Oh, yeah, instead of being misogynistic, they'd be less racist, like less sexist. So there is a tie in all this with veganism, and I would argue to a very strong degree.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I was just gonna like piggyback on what Cal said. Is like, imagine he was debating somebody on like racism or homophobia, and they just said like, I'm agnostic on the position. Like, they could just end the conversation there, or say, yeah, I don't know if it's wrong to be racist.
Yeah.
It's just like, and then he could try to do something similar to NTT and say, well, there's similarities between these individuals, and they could just say, well, I don't know. It's not apparent to me whether it's bad or not.
Yeah, somewhere in here I said exactly what you said. I was like, I pressed him on this. I said, would it be okay to you if somebody was like agnostic when it comes to like graping, right? Like, of course not. To you, like, that would be a terrible answer. Like, why did you grape this person? Well, I'm agnostic as to whether it's good or bad. Like, that's what Parker is doing analogously when it comes to eating animals, or literally, putting them in gas chambers, or bringing them into existence for food. So I think it's directly analogous to what Parker's doing. Yet that's another contradiction I laid out, right? You could lay out. So yeah, let's go back to the beginning.
So to clarify, you don't think increasing the level of agriculture leads to deaths of animals or insects?
Not necessarily.
So increasing the amount of land that you need doesn't lead to deaths of insects and deaths of animals. Just clarifying the view for you.
It could, probabilistically, of course it could.
I'm not talking about could. Do you think it does?
That hasn't, hold on, let me speak. It has nothing to do with net disutility. I agree that deaths could be a problem, but when it comes to disutility, it is not. And I'm not even utilitarian, and I hold to more like a threshold deontics perspective. So again, this is why you're strawmanning veganism, even under utilitarianism, because we're not saying that deaths are bad. We're saying that net disutility is bad.
Yeah. So again, right, because I'm talking about the consumption past the amount that's necessary for the body. So that would be net disutility from the amount in which would be achieved from just using the level of agriculture necessary to be able to achieve the amount of calories that you would need to survive.
Demonstrate that, because in my view, under my view,
wait, Carrie, I appreciate the galaxy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm clarifying the argument here that you're posing. You're disputing the idea that more land for agriculture leads to death.
Yeah. So first, he had me on the small screen, right? Even though it's like actual debate, he put me on a small screen, trying to like seemingly like trying to diminish my, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, yeah. So when it comes to utilitarianism, like, he was not showing that there is a net disutility when it comes to, being a vegan bodybuilder, or, having a caloric surplus. He was not showing that. He was equating number of deaths to, equals bad or disutility, right? And that's incorrect. You would have to show that there's a net disutility, right?
Yeah, and if I could just chime in on this, like when it comes to like exercise science, we have a ton of data that shows that exercising is really healthy for you. So anybody that exercises is going to have to be in a calorie surplus, right? It increases bone density, increases longevity, decreases chances of chronic disease, increases mental health. So those are all utilities that we're getting from consuming these surpluses of calories. Also, the other thing he needs to also demonstrate first is, like you were saying, is he needs to show that there is more deaths in crop fields than there is in like a natural landscape. And from the data that I looked up, it doesn't seem to be that way, because there's a biodiversity loss on croplands. And there'd be a gain on wildlands where you'd have more predators and more prey species. So if you're looking, like, you'd have to prove 2 points in order for that to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, obviously,
You cut out.
oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, to come in on the bodybuilder thing, I think there's a significant amount of empirics to say that a great many people engage in exercise due to like bodybuilders, people that they aspire to look like. And I think that's a great way that essentially motivates people to actually engage in physical exercise. And the data on, like engaging in exercise for health is overwhelming. And I think that the net utility gained by having vegan bodybuilders particularly, and I know that you mentioned this particularly as well, because obviously there's an archaic notion about, like soy and, like veganism being so altruistic that it's quote unquote unmasculine, and having these big vegan bodybuilders provide such net utility for us as well. And in terms of the like consuming more calories thing as well, it would have been a great nexus point into introducing like vertical farming and greenhouse farming and hydroponics and all that into the conversation, because then the actual crop deaths would have been a non-entity anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say that, being healthier would necessarily justify more crop deaths. But what I would say is that more vegan bodybuilders, because the studies I showed actually show that people perceive vegans as weak, right? The soy boys. So having vegan bodybuilders, to look up to as people who, represent veganism in a way, that would be a net positive utility in that way. There'd also be a net positive when, they spread the word at the gym or when they talk about it online or social media, right? I think that's a net utility to have that asset. So I think that's a good reason to think that vegan bodybuilders are not doing anything wrong. I think that there's a net positive there. So his argument was just complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Now at the end, anything else that you guys want to talk about there?
Yeah, I also think, unfortunately, the way that the debate was conducted, which was like the conduct of it was incredibly childish and incredibly, like, for want of a better term, unprofessional. I think that, there was many opportunities to jump into the fact that obviously animal rights and veganism is predicated upon this notion of threshold deontology. And it was almost like that didn't even get an opportunity to be included into the conversation, because I don't know, like it got stuck at the, in this merry-go-round at the climatic point, and there would have been so many great opportunities to actually discuss what veganism is all about, but it sounded to me like he had no interest in that whatsoever.
Yeah, I look. I wish we could have talked about more about it. I guess I should have done better at moving on from that situation and kind of like doing another kind of introspection on that.
I don't think he wanted you to. I think that was the problem.
Yeah, he was talking over me a lot and all that. But the point is, I should have done a better job in refuting that. I mean, Amdir came in and kind of tried to do that. But at the end of the day, like, he conceded to what Amdir said, which was what I said, but just in a shorter form, right? Like, what Amdir said was everything I said, just in a more longer, elaborate form. At the end of the day, Parker really thinks we can harm animals because of their aesthetic value. That's what he conceded to, right? Now, most people are going to look at that and say that's absurd, right? Like, that's absurd.
Yeah, it seemed to me like he treated you and Amdir like completely different. Like, he had some kind of negative feelings towards you coming in, and then when Amdir came in, all of a sudden he was quiet. He let him speak and things. And when you were in there, he muted you a few times, and it was just like bad blood at some point.
Yeah,
the small screen thing as well. I don't know what that was all about at the start. That was crazy.
Yeah, the first thing he said to me was, "How did I straw man veganism?" Right? He didn't want to actually.
Oh yeah, so he does. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, guys, look, I understand why he would have this perspective on me, because I mean that's how most people view me on TikTok. I'm the aggressive one, the abrasive guy. I'm an activist first and foremost. I'm not a philosophy bro, right? So I'm not going to be nice to you all the time for the sake of being nice. I think that activism entails being a bit abrasive and pushing people's buttons a little bit, right? And that's what I really wanted to do at this debate, and I succeeded in that regards completely. I succeeded in bringing this topic to the table, and right, pressing him on the issues and making him look absurd, right? That's really what I did. Now, Danny came in and he tried to like point out a reductio in my view, which, okay, you might be able to. I'm not saying that my views are, perfectly great and everyone's going to agree with mine, but still not going to be even remotely close to the reductio that Parker's view entails, right? So that's the point.
Yeah, he seemed like a good guy, but I don't even think it was a reductio that he brought up, because it was basically the same situation we would treat any human in that he brought up.
Yeah, let me play a little bit about that.
There's rights. So, for example, if somebody's trying to come into my property, like my business.
Why?
I'd ask you, like, do you kill cockroaches when they're like in your house?
Yeah, so I'm like, as a threshold deontic, my position, my normative theory is like threshold deontology. What I'm saying, what that means is essentially, I think that animals should have rights inherently, but there are specific points, there are certain thresholds at which like the consequences are severe enough to, kind of break the rules and, infringe on others' rights. So for example, if somebody's trying to come into my property, like even a person with trying to take away my house or steal my stuff, I'm going to do what I can to get rid of them. The same with a cockroach, right? If a cockroach is coming into my house, I'm going to get rid of them as if I have to.
Yeah, but one you would kill, the other one you'd call the police, maybe, right?
I would kill the person who's invading my house for sure.
Wait, okay, but maybe after. What if they're like trespass? You kill a trespasser.
If they're trespassing and my life is threatened and my house is threatened, yes, I'll do what I can to get rid of that being.
But they're not. Let's say it's a kid that that like a get off the lawn kind of situation. Okay, you wouldn't. If it were a cockroach, you'd just kill it right then and there. No question. No warnings, no nothing. Right. But for humans, you would consider a little bit more as to what you're going to do. And so I could do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So then we could do the name the trait thing. What about the cockroach makes it such that it's you don't treat it the same way as a human?
Well, because a cockroach doesn't have the same rationality level, doesn't have the same sentience level. But that's not relevant to. It's not relevant to veganism, because veganism does not say that we're supposed to treat humans the same as animals. What we're saying is that they should have rights as humans do, not the same rights necessarily, or not the same privileges, not the same values. It's about.
Yeah. So his example was kind of bad, because he with the cockroach thing, I wouldn't just go up to a random cockroach on my front lawn and just kill them, right? I think that's wrong. But if they were coming to invade my house, coming to, infest my house and eat up my wood and or eat up my furniture and stuff, yeah, of course I'm going to exterminate them if I have to. I'm going to exhaust all the least fatal options I first can. Then, if I have to, exterminate. So I think this reductio is not a very good one. I think that, in fact, there really wasn't one. I think that I in this situation, it really was. I really would treat animals and humans the same way in that regards. However, yes, we do treat animals differently than humans because of the rationality differences, right? The sentience differences. There is a big difference in value as how we perceive animals versus humans. So I think in those regards, right, there is justification for treating them a bit differently. And the same would go within the human species, right? If there's somebody who is disabled, we treat them differently than somebody who's not disabled, right? We restrict some of their privileges. We restrict them from, driving cars, for example. So I think that it's completely consistent.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the main thing he missed out on is in NTT, you have to trade adjust things, right? So he's comparing two completely different scenarios. So what he's talking about is like a human breaking in your house. You'd call the police on them. Let's say there was a giant rational cockroach that broke in your house that you could bargain with, right? I mean, would you just like instantly like unalive them just because they broke in your house? No, you try to bargain with them, get them out, call the police if there's police that could arrest them. Or conversely, if there was like little tiny humans that were irrational that were spreading disease in your house and, like you said, chewing up your furniture or whatever, like, yeah, you would unalive them too if that was the only option that you had.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, if the cockroach was rational like a human, of course I would try to bargain with it and try to, develop peace with it. But if you can't, the next step is to do what you can to get rid of them.
Yeah, I would say, obviously, as Plant's quite aptly said, obviously the differentiation here, and this wasn't even close to being a reductio, but you can't reason with cockroaches. We coexist with animals on this planet the best that we possibly can. And obviously, like the introspective dilemma that crop deaths is due to the fact that we can't reason with animals, right? So we have to do the best that we can. So just saying, you would call the police on if it was a human, like, that's not possible for a cockroach, obviously. And, and I think that you stated your position in a way that was concurrent between humans and cockroaches. You quite rightly said, if a human entered my property and they were a threat to my life, I would do what I had to do to survive, or I would do what I had to do to preserve my health. So I think that there need not be an NTT process in equalizing like two different scenarios here, because you made your position quite sort of like concurrent and quite like identical between the two. And also as well, if you're philosophically sentiocentric as well, I don't think this is that relevant, but if you're sentiocentric, then you value like sentience is a spectrum, and you value sentience on a spectrum, and we value animals in different ways due to sentience, in the way that Mike rightly said, we value different humans in different ways, or like we restrict them in different ways to sentience. And a cockroach doesn't come within universes of having the sentience of a pig put into a gas chamber that he said he was agnostic about, gassing to death. So like there's so many false equivalencies here, it's actually crazy.
Yeah, if I could just touch on it too, because I think that Danny and Parker are both confused because they think veganism is about value levels, where it's about like negative rights. So it's about upholding animal rights and not causing harm to them. It's not necessarily about what we value, right? Because like I might value my friend more than I value a stranger, but equally I don't want to cause harm to either of them.
Right.
Exactly. And that was the point I was talking with Parker about, right? Remember, if you guys saw it, I said, I value me more than you, Parker. And he was like, no. But like the point is, even though I don't value you more than me, I still think you should not be harmed. There's no justification for harming you. That's the point, right? Value level is irrelevant. What's relevant is, how should I treat you in a given situation if I don't have to harm you? And that's all it really means to be vegan. And that's exactly what you said. They don't understand about it. And that's what they were strawmanning. Yeah. And then Amdir comes in and he talks about these things in a more elaborate fashion, and he's a nicer person. Of course, Parker's going to be nicer to him. But I expect that. It's okay. I think that it's good that I was able to press Parker on this. I think I'm very happy that I did this, and he accepted. So Parker, if you're watching, I appreciate you having me on your platform. I really do appreciate that. But I think you should be more aware of what's going on when it comes to veganism. I think that the topics that you talk about and you care about, as you say, and you should, I think that veganism intertwines with all those things and can generate so much positive net utility, right? I mean, when it comes to the ethics advantages, the economic advantages, the environmental advantages, the societal advantages, right? The social justice benefits, the disease and health benefits, like they're just across the board, right? There's so much utility. And if I wish I could have just actually laid out my case. I would have had, I've had, you guys saw my PDF file. I have like tons of studies and tons of like paragraphs, like, but of course he just wanted to get the gotcha in this debate, right? When it comes to the things he said about the racism remarks, he just wanted to get the gotcha somewhere to make veganism look bad, or to make me look bad. I think that was very disingenuous of him. But yeah, I appreciate Amdir being there. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what Amdir did was essentially do what I did, which in a longer form, and it kind of exposed him further.
I think he was just more he seemed more open to engaging with Amdir, because essentially, I think you did an absolutely fantastic job through the NTT process, because I think ultimately it came down to what, like a level of rationale, which you obviously deconstructed. It came down to this notion of being part of a certain species, which obviously you deconstructed. And ultimately, the ultimate symmetry breaker was this notion of, the aesthetic thing. And it seems like when you tried to penetrate that issue, he got very, very defensive. And I think when Amdir came on and he started kind of like in detail going through this trait equalization process, he seemed a lot more receptive to Amdir. And I think that that's where the debate got stuck, and he got very defensive when you were trying to do what Amdir did.
Yeah, look, my persona on TikTok is my persona, and you guys know me. I'm not the person who's just going to be sitting there and being nice all the time, and just, well, not just, I'm not saying I'm rude all the time, but I'm saying like I'm going to be pushy. I'm going to be aggressive at certain points. I'm going to push people where they don't want to be pushed. That's just what it takes to be an activist. So that's why I said my final words before I left was, look, I'm an activist here, right? And I think that what this debate was bringing people that were intellectual people to this topic, having a conversation, sparking conversations about this, because these are big issues. And that's why I did this debate. And I think that in that regards, I succeeded. So
yeah, I was happy you brought that up, because I like to show that it's more about the subject matter rather than who's right. And I think a lot of these debates, it gets into, just like a boxing match and who's, smarter or, has the most consistency. But I think we need to really just focus on the issue.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously that's what's denotive of the whole philosophy bro culture. But ultimately, just before we move on to another point, like you talked about all of these notions of, and we touched on briefly the way that meat consumption and speciesism perpetuates all of these other notions. And we've got that great, the article written by the two psychologists from the University of Kent, which was Animalizing Women and Feminizing Vegan Men, the psychological intersections of sexism, speciesism, meat, and masculinity. So, I mean, like the empirics on this are absolutely unequivocal, right? And you would think that of all people, this being the main thing, like Parker's platform about educating people that, racism's wrong, misogyny's wrong, sexism's wrong, transphobia is wrong. You would think that these particular empirics and this particular notion in the debate would be of so much great interest to him. So it's such a shame that this wasn't allowed in the debate. It really was.
Yeah, and I think when we look at the statistics, we can see like that a lot of people that are gay are actually vegan, and a lot of people that are people of color are vegan as well, because I think they can kind of see the similarities between these situations and realize that it really is a social issue. But with Parker, he's really digging his heels on this, and he's refusing to even gauge that could be a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, like what was that study? The one that I sent to Lydia recently. It was the one. Is being anti-vegan a distinct dietarian identity? An investigation with omnivores, vegan, and self-identified anti-vegans. And obviously, one of the conclusory aspects of that study was the fact that the people that are the most vehemently anti-vegan are those that are anti-progressive movements, right? So the ones that would be against like equality of voice of women in society, the ones that would be predominantly anti-LGBTQ+, the ones that would be anti-Black Lives Matters, like statistically speaking, these would be the people that would have the greatest like anti-vegan identities. So like again, this should all be of great interest to Parker. So it's really a shame.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm very happy that we were able to debate, and hopefully more of these debates happen with larger creators. I think it's well deserved. I think veganism deserves to get its share of exposure. I think that's all.
Yeah, if I could just quickly touch on that too, like it might be the case that Parker never becomes vegan or never even has any interest in it, but you also have to factor in that at one point, I think there was almost like 6,000 people watching that. So you have to realize like how many people are in the chat that are listening to this and realizing like his argument really isn't that great and there isn't one for this. So you have to think about it too, like the audience is also listening in. There's a lot of people that could be, influenced positively from that.
I mean, I think the audience was predominantly on your side as well. I mean, if you look through even the playback of the video, the vast majority of people are saying Mike. Mike's making a lot of sense. And I think that even the fact that Parker's fan base seemed to see the, you know, the veracity and the validity in the vegan argument speaks volumes.
Absolutely. And the last thing I want to mention is that, you know, on the debate with the vegan teacher, I think that Parker mentioned that he has like ARFID or something, or whatever the case may be. That if Parker's trying to hide from, you know, using that as somehow, you know, a reason to not talk about these things, that's wrong. I think that regardless of what you have, you can still talk about veganism. You can still advocate it, no matter what you have. Now, sure, whatever you might have a disorder which disables you from, you know, being fully plant-based. I'll completely understand that. The problem is that advocating for it is possible for anybody to do. Okay, and that's why I did this. Right? I thought he would bring up the ARFID thing, and he didn't, which is okay. But if he did, it would still be okay, because it doesn't matter. What matters here is, are you advocating for a good idea, or you're just going to reject it because you don't want to do it, or because you don't like the ideology, or you don't want to hear it. That's the issue to me. So,
yeah, I had sort of intermittent anorexia for several years when I was quite a bit younger, and you know, I certainly empathize with somebody's plight in that regard. But ultimately, I think you hit the nail on the head. Just using that as a shield to hide behind from having the discourse is really, really like really egregious, especially for a platform of Parker's as well, to talk about, you know, progressive movements, social justice fights. Can I mention one more thing just before we finish?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention the one segment about the environment, because obviously you cited, he actually did. It looked like he wanted to engage in this notion about the environment, and he believed that the salient argument for veganism was this environmental notion, which I thoroughly disagree with. You know, I think animal rights is the main argument, but you know, even you cited that great paper, I believe, what was it, a UN peer-reviewed paper or something like that, but essentially it mentioned the way that, economically speaking, shifting to a plant-based system would be like hugely beneficial globally. And I think his critique of that was, oh, well, that's the whole world, like it's not about America. And it's like, I was really flabbergasted by that, because it was like, animal agriculture is not just an American problem. And it seems like you're doing these lives about Palestine, and you're doing these lives about you know, LGBTQ rights, hopefully all over the world, not just in America. So surely, if you're a social justice warrior, your interests would extend globally. And I just thought that was a really, really poor rebuttal, to be honest, because there's a lot of people elsewhere in the world that are in much worse economic situations than certainly indeed you are in America and I am in the UK. And I just think like brushing it off because it wasn't a quote unquote American problem was really poor.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. That's a great point. Never thought of. Yeah, guys. Any other last remarks?
I just, hope he engages in it, and I hope he looks into it a little further. Maybe he'll start to like embrace some ideas, even if he doesn't go vegan himself. Maybe he'll kind of start understanding it a little bit more, and I hope he at least talks to more people in the future about it.
Yeah, that was my goal, right? To get people talking about it more, and hopefully I did my part in doing that a little bit. Thanks, guys, for being here. Plants and Plates, go check them out on TikTok. Is that your at Plants and Plates?
Yep.
Okay, Kalel.
Yeah. Mine's just KAL.ELL. But yeah, thank you so much, mate. I think that you did a great job. I think that it showed how absurd the position against veganism is. And I think that hopefully in the future he'll do diligent research into the net utility that veganism actually provides for everybody. So great job, Mike, and thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, thank you.
Thank you guys so much for being activist, and everybody watching, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.